My name is Emilie and I'm coming from Norway and I'm a young reporter.
Hello, Emilie.
My name is Ruslan, I am from Kazakhstan.
And I'm Judy from China. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Judy.
Hi Terry, I'm Jade and I'm from the Cayman Islands.
Hi Terry, I'm Te-Riu and I'm from the Cook Islands.
Hi Terry,
Hello.
I'm Yang from China and I'm a university student now.
Nice to meet you.
Hi Terry, I'm Saaed, I'm from Sudan.
Hello there.
So Terry, they, as you know, per our emails earlier today, yesterday they all failed. No, I didn't get one story from them, one profile from them. They all supplied sports stories, but today they've all provided a profile. So I'm a happy boy today. We've still got a bit of work to do in cleaning them up. They still need to learn how to dig in a bit more. But if you could just give your perspective as we were talking about, that would be wonderful. What do you need? What do you look for?
I would be happy to. So this is, let me see if I understand this. Everybody is broken up into groups, and this is one particular group, and there are, what, 4 others, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever we talk about on the phone this morning, and I will try to be as clear as possible, and please don't hesitate to ask me questions. I'm hoping that you can pass on if you find if you hear anything worthwhile, and I think you will, pass on to some of your colleagues, and perhaps that will get the word out, and everybody will be more or less on the same page on what it takes to produce a good profile. Does everybody understand what Anthony means? First of all, when we're talking about an athlete's profile, you're all very clear on that, correct?
Yeah.
Well, they weren't yesterday.
Now we are.
But today we were.
They are today. Okay. What is so wonderful about sports reporting is that perhaps in any other discipline in journalism, you have more of an opportunity to do these wonderful profiles in sports, because sports is all about people and what makes them win, what makes them fail, what makes them tick. And people want to know about that. People want, there's plenty of hero worship going on. Let's use Leo Messi. Everybody knows who I'm talking about there. But, what happens in the World Cup? What is it about this player? People want to know what drives them, why they fail, why they win, and that's your job. That's your job. And as you do this, as you continue to grow in this business, in this discipline, whether it's text or it's photos or it's video, social media, you'll get better at this. But you'll have to know what to look for first and how to go about it. So are you still with me so far?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What you need to do more than, you have to take notes. Everybody knows that. You have to write down quotes, and you have to record that, and you have to get that information to be able to write your story. But what's really important, and start training yourself to do this, is to keep your eye on the person. Your eyes and your ears are just as important as your fingers when you take down all that information. You have to watch their actions, watch how they answer you, watch what they do, what their mannerisms are. You can tell when someone is uncomfortable, when they fidget in their seat and they wiggle and they don't really like being in the spotlight, and how they say things. There was a really good piece. I sent Anthony the story on Luis Suarez, and he has a wife who does not think he's that great at all. He scored 4. I mean, she loves him, but she's not. She acts like she's very unimpressed with everything he does. He scored 4 goals in a game. I guess it was it Norway City. He scored 4 goals, and he said to his wife during this interview, "Do you know how hard it is to score 4 goals in a game?" And she said, "Yeah, basically, who cares?" And she started talking about her children again. That sort of shows you that in that house, he's not king. She's she's not that impressed with what he does. A lot of football fans are impressed with what he does, especially when he's not biting somebody. But she's not that impressed. I'll give you another example on Leo Messi. Two reporters from ESPN went to his little hometown in Rosario in Argentina and wanted to get a flavor of Messi. Who is Messi? Nobody knew him. Nobody knew him. They said he hasn't really done much for Argentina. There's no posters of him in the town. There's nothing. And he, very shy, very soft-spoken, doesn't have much to say. I mean, all those things build a story and make it very, very interesting to readers on what makes an athlete tick. What are they like? Chances are most people who you're writing for will never really get a chance to meet these people. So you have that chance and you have that opportunity to make it real for them. And you have to really pay attention to what they're saying, how they're saying it, and what they're doing. Now, let me go back to what's critical in the profile. The writing, of course, is important, but in addition to really watching them when you have somebody in front of you, an athlete in front of you, just really paying attention to their mannerisms. And you don't have to make it really obvious, but don't take your eye off the ball, so to speak. Keep a keen eye on their mannerisms and also what they're saying, of course, and listen how they say things. But in order to really get the most out of a profile and an interview, you must do homework. It is so critical in everything you do in sports writing to know what you're talking about, whether it's covering a match, whether it's just a regular game story, but in particular for a profile, because you'll have to know what to ask. You have to know the right questions, and you just can't sit down, let's say, at a table or in a lounge and say, "Tell me about yourself." Many athletes don't really like to talk about themselves. They're very shy. Rafael Nadal is very, very shy and doesn't open up. So you have to know enough. You have to be learned enough and know enough from what you read and what you find to be able to say, "Well, I read this about you. Is this true? Tell me a little bit about this." You must do that, or you'll have a very flat interview or a very flat story. You may have one anyway, depending on the person. If he's in a bad mood that day, you can't control it. But you want that interviewee, you want that athlete to know that you at least took the time to do a lot of homework on him or her so that you know what to ask and you're not wasting their time. That will count for a lot. Are you still with me?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions?
Not really.
Is everybody still up? Okay. All right. And I have to tell you, out of everything, I remember, I'm just going to give you a personal example. I remember what hooked me into sports writing and into this, and this is such a wonderful thing. And I have to tell you, this could be one of the most glorious things that you can do with your life. It's a wonderful profession. I remember being hooked on sports by reading profiles. I wanted to know all about these people, and there are so many athletes out there in different disciplines. There's basketball, there's football, there's golf. I really like, for some reason, golf profiles. I wanted to know more about the athletes. Tiger Woods, everybody knows the name Tiger Woods. You really have to dig for Tiger Woods because he doesn't say very much. And many athletes are like that. He's polite. He'll give you a few sentences, but boy, he is tough to crack. You can't get very much information out of him. Rory McIlroy, on the other hand, is pretty straightforward, very down to earth. Will give you a little bit more insight into himself than Tiger will, and you will find this out as you do more of these profiles. Who is a talker and who isn't. But you have to know, you have to come equipped to do these profiles, and that is you have to know as much as you can know about the subject you're interviewing. All right, are you still with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Does anyone have any questions?
Terry, this is Jade. I do. I was wondering, I know sometimes when you do interviews, like you mentioned, people don't actually talk a lot. If you have to write that profile and you have to get information out of them, how do you do that?
You ask them, if you see that a person's not going to open up, he or she is going to say yes, no, that's a part of your profile, that they're not saying very much. That there wasn't a lot of give and take, that maybe he had something else, on his or her mind that day. You can say, are you, is what's your day like, or something like that. You can write all this. If a person, let's say you're having breakfast with someone, and here's part of the profile. If somebody orders, 6 chickens for breakfast, you can put that in your story that LeBron James woke up today and during an interview in the hotel restaurant, ate a hearty breakfast of 10 pancakes and 6 chickens. If he had scrambled eggs, it's not a headline. But you have little details like that that tell the reader, boy, this is the kind of fuel that this athlete puts in his body, and this is what, if I sat down to have breakfast with LeBron James, I'll see a big hearty platter of chickens and all this food, and this is how he starts his day. It's a little detail. Is it the whole story? It isn't, but it's the kind of thing you want to notice and make a note of in your story. To go back to your question, if they don't give you very much, you just say who didn't have much to say this morning. There's a way you can put that. Gave 1 or 2 word answers. You don't want to make an editorial judgment. You can't say that they seem preoccupied. You can only report what's in front of you and what you see. If somebody doesn't really want to talk, you can say that. But it's, you have to almost be a magician and try to pull a rabbit out of the hat when there's a hard interview like this. You have to draw on what you know about this person as best you can and try to get him to open up or get her to open up about themselves. Get them to talk about where they grew up, maybe their family, what got them interested in this sport. You really have to work for some of these athletes because, more and more they don't want to give you very much information about themselves. So it's really up to you to draw it out.
Terry, I've actually got 2 questions, and I'll put it back to them. But a couple of the things that came up was they were having trouble, I felt, in linking. In other words, in the actual writing, how do you link key components of a story together? I mean, how do they make a judgment on what's going to be the lead, and how do we move through a story? And I know it just comes with writing, but it's with all of them there wasn't a link moving from start to finish in a story. And it's trying to understand it's different from a news story. And then the next one, which is a fair question, I'm saying I don't want a sports story. I don't want to read about sport. I want to read about the person. I want to find out who they are. And so the question, how much of the sport is it? So can you just sort of touch on those 2 just quickly?
Well, I always had a rule of thumb in trying to decide. Let's say you sit down. Let's say you were with, and you did an interview for an hour. Okay, very casual. Maybe you're grabbing a sandwich, or maybe it's on a pitch, or maybe it's in a room somewhere. But you spend an hour with the person, and you walk away. I've always told writers to craft the story in the order of what was the most important bit of conversation. If you had to go home and tell your friend or your brother or sister or your parents, what's the one thing that you would tell them about that interview? What jumps out at you? Something always jumps out. And really, what you would tell somebody, a friend on a telephone conversation, let's say you say, I interviewed Rory McIlroy today. Something will stick with you. Trust me. Something will stick with you and jump out from that interview. That's your lead. That's the thing you focus on. You are a storyteller. You are telling a story. And what makes a good journalist is the ability to tell that story very clearly in very human terms. So if you go home and you say, boy, I interviewed McIlroy and he just worships his dad. Every other word out of his mouth was, my dad taught me this, my dad taught me that. If that's the first thing you tell your mom or your dad or your friend about Rory McIlroy, then that should be very high in your story. It never fails. Something will stick with you, and you'll walk away thinking, "Gee, I didn't know that," or "That was really interesting." That's what your whole story should revolve around. There'll be one or two facts in there, and or make a little list for yourself. Like, what did I just hear? What did I just learn? And make a list. And that pretty much will give you a map on how to craft your story. Are you with me? Do you understand what I'm saying? Really, the way you would explain it to your best friend. Boy, I just spent 20 minutes with Messi, and this is my impression. That's your story. And Anthony, what was part two? What was the part two of the question?
It was just that they were having a trouble in getting a flow from, you take a piece and there's a past and there's a sports history and there's a key moment of this. But how do they decide what's the lead, which you've just answered? But then as a writer, how do you link one paragraph from another when they're completely separate components? And,
well, I have to tell you, we call them transitions. How to make the story flow, how to keep the reader interesting. And if you're doing this on camera, it's the same thing. If you're talking into a camera, you have to be coherent enough and link them all very deftly so that people can follow you. What you wanted, first of all, you have to say, for those who don't know who Suarez or Messi, who they are, you have to identify them. You have to tell them, who they play for, why you're doing the interview. Do you have to do statistics? Do you have to put a lot of the sports in? I say no. You have to make it clear. There's a reason you're doing the interview, and it's because this person has done something in sports. So of course you mention that, but the worst crime you can commit is boring your reader or your viewer, okay? Somebody who's watching you or somebody who is reading you with a lot of statistics. Get that junk out of there, okay? If they're going to read an interview on Messi, they already pretty much know that he is the best guy on the planet at what he does, except like in World Cups, but I didn't say that. But he is the best person on the planet, so you don't have to give them chapter and verse. You have to tell them what he does and why you're interviewing that person. But people are dying to read about the human side. They already know a lot of what they're doing because everybody watches them on TV. They see them, they hear about them. So you don't have to give them chapter and verse on everything they've done in their sports since they were babies. But you have to make them real. And the biggest crime you can commit is to be boring. Never be boring. Don't make stuff up. You'll have to find another profession if you just cheat a little bit and say something that's not true. We all know that. You're truthful, you're honest, and you follow that, you follow that no matter what you do. But you want to have some fun. You want to focus on, if it's a profile of the human side of these people, their personalities, what they do. Does somebody, come back from a match and find walk his dog around his neighborhood for 6 hours just to let off some steam? Or whether they come home and practice some more for 6 hours to do the transition on why you're writing about this person, but it's more important to draw them out. And let me tell you something. As you do this, as you get more experience in doing this, you get better at making these transitions. I don't mind telling you, it's a really hard thing to do to make it flow very easily. The more you do it, the easier it will come. But it's a hard thing. So if you struggle with it, everybody has struggled with it. And good editors will help you get over that and show you how to link those paragraphs so they don't jump around too much and it's pretty seamless. So it's one of these things where the more you practice, the more you do, the better off you'll be.
Thank you. Questions?
I have one. Hi Terry, this is Te-Riu from the
Hi.
Cook Islands. What if you're interviewing an athlete and the most interesting thing about them?
I can't hear you. Can you get closer to the phone, or I can't?
She's getting closer.
I'm here. Can you
There
hear me
go,
now?
There you go.
What if you're interviewing an athlete and the most interesting thing about them, they don't want you to mention it in your story? How do you deal with that? Do you just keep
You don't mention
pushing?
it.
You don't mention it
Just
at all.
don't mention it. If they tell you something and they say, please don't mention that, you can if it's really delicious, as I call it, if it's something that you know everyone will talk about, you can try to talk them into changing their mind and say, gee, that's really something about you. Let's say it's something very honorable. I mean, they're not going to tell you anything dishonorable, are they? But let's say they spend 5 hours a week at a children's hospital, visiting sick kids, doing some good work, but they don't want you to mention that. Sometimes you can talk them into it and say, a lot of people will be inspired by this. Is there a reason you don't want me to use this? A lot of people don't know this side of you, and people would, and this would mean a lot to a lot of your fans to know that you do this. If the bottom line is you can't change their mind and they ask you not to use it, then don't use it. You will have zero credibility with the people you interview. If they read something they told you not to use, they'll never trust you. And that's what this is all about. So if they say no, no is no. But you can try, and I would say if I was your editor and you told me something really, really interesting and you didn't even try to get them to change their mind, I would be very disappointed in you. So, and again, you'll know it, just as you said, something interesting, you'll know it when they say it. So you want to use that good material, and I think it's up to you to try and fight as hard as you can to get them to change their mind. Sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't.
Okay, thank you, Terry.
Thank you. That's a good question.
This is Jade again. I was wondering, you did mention about doing homework before you go out to an interview, but in our case, we could have interviewed anybody, but I went up to somebody that was walking around in the Olympic Village and I just asked, if they could answer a few questions, if I could get to know them. Because I didn't know who they were and I didn't do homework and there was nothing to really kind of help me in that, how would you pull out the most important information that you would need at that time?
Well, okay, so you just, you just grabbed somebody just randomly, just blindly?
Yes.
Okay. Did you, there's not much you can do in that situation. First of all, let me ask you this, did you get a pretty good interview?
Yeah, it was pretty good. What I did before turned on, because I actually recorded them, I just asked them some general questions and told them about me and kind of got to know them before I quizzed them, just to make them feel a little bit more comfortable so I know that they could actually talk to me. So it wasn't actually bad, but there's some of the questions I was asking, obviously he didn't really know me, so he didn't feel comfortable telling me every single thing, which I found a challenge.
Well, in that case, when you do something, sounded like it was just pretty spontaneous. You went up to an athlete. Obviously, you didn't do any homework. You didn't have time to do any homework. You didn't know you were going to be interviewing this person. Did you
many people that we could have interviewed. It would have been hard to locate them at that specific time.
In that case, again, the homework is really important. If you know ahead of time who you're going to interview, it's incumbent, it's important. It's no wiggling or out of this at all. You must know what you're talking about, or they're not going to waste their time talking to you. You at least have to know a little bit about them to generate the conversation. In your case, you ran into somebody pretty randomly. I would just do the best I could with the material that I had. In that case, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. You can try to get, some material. I don't know if there's like a bio sheet or something like that you could get that would be available to you from this person's sport. But if you didn't know who you were going to interview to do some homework on, there's not much to do except work with the material that you have. That's the best thing I can think of.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Come on, our Chinese friends. Come on.
I think Jade just asked the question I wanted to ask.
So you ask a question.
This might be your only chance.
You have to have fun too. I have to tell you, it's not everybody in the world who can say, I have the greatest job and I have so much fun doing it. And you have such an opportunity to have wonderful careers where you can say that. You can see the world, you can have fun, and you can meet wonderful people. But behind that, there is a lot of hard work. And it comes with knowing what you're talking about, doing a lot of homework. And the other thing, and I can't put too fine a point on this. You have to know how to talk to people. They're not going to tell you things if you can't be a personable person, someone who knows how to talk to someone else, to have a nice conversation, to maybe make a little joke or draw them out. I mean, if you go in there, and I don't know how to say this, I guess I'll only say it one way. If you go in there and you're sort of like a bump on a log, and you don't know how to smile and say good morning, thank you for your time. I'd really like to ask you some questions about this, and where would you like to begin, or anything like that. If you don't know how to talk and make them comfortable and put them at ease, you're not going to have a very good story. So there's, it looks easy, but it's really, really hard to write a good story where you come away, where the reader or the viewer will say, gee, I didn't know that. That was a really good piece. Now I feel like I know that person a little bit better.
Now, one final thing then from me. A couple of them were asking about, the 5 W's. And I'm going, no, it's not a news article. Forget all that crap. And trying to set, with a profile, it's not about that. But how do you ever give instruction on how to lead a good profile, or do you leave that completely to the writer?
Ahead of time, mostly we would talk about where we thought the interview might go. Just key questions. What I would do, I wouldn't lead the witness, so to speak, because you don't know what direction an interview is going to take until you're actually in the middle of the interview. And as Anthony said, forget that 5 W's business. Forget it. That's ancient history, not in a profile. I mean, there are certain things you want in there. You want, don't put their age up high. People don't play football when they're 75 years old. So you can assume they're in the prime of their life. So you can put the age even down a little bit lower. But what I would always make sure is that there were some key points. If you have a chance to spend, 30 minutes with Suarez, you got to ask him about this biting business. I mean, you can't overlook that. You guys, as hard as it may be, there are certain things that, that are just natural questions. So we would go over the questions that we knew we wanted to ask. And, you say, don't end the interview without trying to get some information on this. Ask him about this. Ask her about this. What happened in this match? Why is it you always just, walk off the pitch with your head down without asking. And then again, you have to sit down and figure out what was the best, the meatiest information that you got, and that's how you craft your story. If you were in your neighborhood, where you grew up, and you had a friend who was, who lived, closest to your home, a neighbor, and they said, "Hey, you did this interview. I understand you did this interview," or you told them you did an interview, and they said, "So what was it like?" The most important thing you tell them about that interview is what your story should be crafted around. You'll know it when you see it, and you'll get better at this as you go on. The first thing, something will stick with you. You can't believe this, but this person did this during the interview or said this during the interview. It's the very first thing you'll remember. That's your story. You don't have to, you just pretend, let's say you talk to your best friend, and it's the first thing that you tell them about the interview is your story. It's not that hard. What you would tell someone is what you want to tell the whole world, and take it from there. But again, practice makes perfect. So keep trying to do this. When you do an assignment this week for Anthony or whoever your mentor is, and let's say it is a profile. I don't know how many of these you'll get to write, but come back and just say, and just try to craft a story about the most important thing you would tell someone about the interview. If you come back and you see Anthony and he says, "So how did that go?" And you say, "Gee, this person said this, or this person said this, or what they didn't say," that's your story. Let me give you an example. This is kind of gross almost. This is from a baseball player who used to play for a team in New York, the New York Mets. I sent a reporter to interview him. He had gotten in trouble. He was arrested. He got drunk. He had an automobile crash, and he was all cut up. He had, big cuts on, and he wasn't playing. He was on the injured list, and he was sitting there. And I sent a reporter to talk to him, and for the entire interview, this guy had his head down, and he was picking with his finger at all the cuts on his body. I mean, he wouldn't look at the reporter. He kept picking at these. They were like, just scabby things on his arms and just gross. That's what the reporter wrote. That for an hour and a half, Lenny Dykstra was his name. Lenny Dykstra sat there and picked at all the scabs on his body from the hideous car crash that got him in this mess with the New York Mets. That sounds really horrible, I know, that to write something like that, but you know what? That was 20 years ago, and to this day, when I see that player, I think of him sitting there picking all those horrible things on his arms from a car crash and picking through like the stitch, trying to get at the stitches. That is my impression of Lenny Dykstra, not having the grace to talk to a reporter, but, keep his head up and to answer questions, but he kept his head down and he was just picking at things like, I don't know, it was an impression that has stuck through all these years. So your impressions are very important, and that's why you have to pay attention and use your eyes during an interview, in addition to writing and watching the camera. If you're doing video work in front of the camera, you have to use every sense that you have: your ears, your eyes, and of course you have to take notes. But what strikes you as important will strike somebody else as important too. I think with time, you may have to work with that a little bit, but trust your instincts, and they'll get better and better as you keep doing this.
Thank you very, very much, Terry.
I hope this helps you, and I think this is a wonderful program, and good luck to everybody. And Anthony, thank you for the opportunity
to wake you up at 6:30 in the morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Terry. I'll send you a couple of their profiles, okay?
I would love to see them, and I hope they get to see some of the profiles that I sent you.
Yeah, they've all got them already.
Okay, good. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.